to take a breath. Take a breath. Can you take this blessing into your body, into the soil of this community? How many of you were in the First Unitarian Church of Oakland when we ordained the Reverend Chris Long? Has this blessing carried you all these years? Amen. Thank you for bringing that witness and that truth back into this community, beloved. You see, there is a loneliness that lives at the center of our callings. Am I right, colleagues? Yes. There's a loneliness, and I think we like to tell ourselves that this is something peculiar to religious professionals or to those wrestling with how best to live a life of purpose. But in truth, the turnings of life find any of us in a place where we are driven, right, to do our small piece of creating more freedom, greater reason, increased generosity, liberation, really, for others and for the world, for any of us doing our ministries. It can be a lonely undertaking. Right? This is one of the challenges that we don't talk about enough. And I lift it today to honor the commitment of the Reverend Chris Long, whom you have called to serve as your settled minister, but also to celebrate this container that you have created to welcome him into this new shared ministry. What does it mean to go forth into the world following a calling that drives one to leave behind the familiar and family, and sometimes even a sense of safety or ease? What does it mean to carry all we have been like the branch of a live oak tree wrapped in moss as a reminder? To carry love that is known toward love that is yet to come. How are we called in these days, facing the turning of the world, to bring the best of ourselves to all that life asks of us? There is so much learning that comes from carrying what we think we already know and understand into new places that are in need of our gifts. So I want to tell you personally, it has been nearly 2 years now since I uprooted myself and my family from the Oakland, California soil where I had established relationships and some understanding even, all the way to land in Maryland where I had never lived and knew little of the earth beyond its forced complicity with the monoculture of tobacco farming and human enslavement. I had a story about Maryland in my mind. I knew to expect mosquitoes. I knew we would have unrelenting heat. And I wondered whether the plants I so carefully cultivated in the sandy, human-made soil around my Oakland home had any chance of survival near the Chesapeake. But those tendrils of relationships that make me who I am matter to me. And so I packed up my garden in the only way you can, by carefully collecting seeds in little jars and carrying them across the country. Now, I could tell you about the unrelenting sun and herbs that thrive in the spring and early fall, but beg for mercy in the hot summer months. I could tell you about the columbine that not only grew from our California seeds, but returned this year and are already gloriously in bloom. I can tell you I cried when I planted sacred tobacco in Maryland soil of my own free will. As an Afro-Latinx woman in this country, my house is literally like yours on the lands of a plantation. But today, beloveds, today is a day of celebration, and I want you to know about what happens when the unknowing, the uprooting, the reorienting, and the investing in the good returns the love of our callings tenfold. So I want to tell you, about heirloom tomatoes. Now let me say, we grow some delicious tomatoes in California. I'm looking at you, Rosemary, we do. It requires close attention to soil, to lots of water, to patience, finding just the right spot with good sun and solid growth. So with the immense soil-amending labor of my beloved chosen family, I set about planting heirloom tomatoes in Maryland. We gave them nutrients, good sun. We started them from seeds with daily fussing, that's me, if you know me, daily fussing, lots of love. And then when they went into the earth outdoors, we gave them nice, tall tomato cages. And we continued with that care. Did we know how tomatoes might respond to the land around our home? We did not at all. And we prepared as best we could. Beloveds, never before have I seen someone have to take a second tomato cage, flip it upside down, use zip ties to attach it to the first one. But we did this because the plants got so huge. And by the time they outgrew, by the time they outgrew the second-story tomato cages, some of them taller than 10 feet, at that point, we gave up. I gave up. We let them grow free, harvesting tomatoes throughout the summer and feeding anyone we could find. Did I learn something about the need to prune tomatoes on land that is ideal for their growth? Yes, I did. Yes, I did, and I was reminded that sometimes we are brought to the right place, in the right moment, and when we honor all that we bring with us, we are showered in blessings. I reminded myself of this year as I started tomato seed by hands. Here goes the fussing again, under the grow lights. Almost twice as many this time because I have no sense of proportion. But as I rehearsed in my mind the promises I would need to make to this year's plants, right, based on what I learned last year, I found myself grieving California less and leaning into the wonder of possibility. Now, I imagine that these recent years have asked most of us to be adaptive, right, to respond to needs we didn't even know our communities might have. We're being invited, beloveds, into mutual care like many of us have not experienced in this lifetime. And our beloveds across a range of identities need us to show up and even to show out in the name of their full, sacred humanity, their right to life and full thriving as our nation battles its historic demons of injustice, cruelty, and violent control. Whether we are talking about transgender rights, voting rights, reproductive justice, the prevention of gun violence, or the insistence that we cannot have a true democracy without justice, many of us are bearing witness to the struggles of humanity in new ways. And that is just in this nation, to say nothing of the need for solidarity around the globe. We are being asked to communicate our Unitarian Universalist values directly, and hear me, with pride, in the public square at a time when we are also in community, working hard with one another to express and claim those values in new ways. Right, so we find ourselves in rich soil, and this too is cause for celebration. And I'm not talking about celebrating the need to intervene against injustice. You will never hear me make light at all of our most impacted communities and what they are facing every day in this country. My heart is with families who cannot afford to move but are desperate to leave, to protect their own right to show up fully in the world or to provide gender-affirming care for their children. My heart is with our communities that are constantly exposed to toxic chemicals because of economic status or race. My heart is with the earth itself as we continue to flounder in the face of climate disruption and the intoxicating compulsions of late-stage capitalism. But loves, today is a day of celebration. So I want to tell you about my joy in experiencing the love that lives at the center of Unitarian Universalism that we are pouring out into the world. I want to invite you back into that joy, even in a time of weariness, right? Even in a time of struggle, even when there is uncertainty, there is this joy. Because I know to my bones that the same spirit of love and welcome, the same unwavering insistence on human goodness, the same trust and faith that the work of our small human living will call us to something better than we know, exists not just here, in the welcome that you all hold for the Reverend Chris Long, but it exists at the heart of our liberal and liberating faith. This is why we are a faith, beloveds. And the thing that makes our callings in ministry and in life less lonely is the knowledge that we do not face the inequities of this world alone. It is the ability to experience community in this sanctuary, yes, but also in the streets, in the halls of justice, to remind us that there are others as committed to equity, to transformation, to pluralism, to generosity, justice, and interdependence as we are ourselves. Do those words sound like us, beloveds? Yes. They do. And if you just recognize the 6 values offered to us in the proposed revision of Article 2 of our bylaws, that wasn't an accident. My joy comes in knowing that more than 10,000 UU voices are reflected in those proposed values that we have been given to chew on and wrestle with together. Honestly, no matter the outcome of this good work, the process itself makes me feel the strength and the commitment of our beloved community, especially when times are hard. What is it about our liberal and liberating faith that offers you joy today? Not the problems, not the foibles, not the joy. Are you joyful to be a Unitarian Universalist? What are the places that can reflect your wisdom, your best knowing, to uphold the life and thriving of every member of this community and all the other communities that are connected to this one? What is life asking of you today? Maybe most importantly, I want to invite you to share what life is asking you with the religious leaders of this precious congregation. Help them to resource you for the calling that is your life. Yes. Reverend Chris told me that the soil here knows his soul clearer than he knows himself. Yes. Have you heard him say this? Yeah, let me say that again. The soil here knows Reverend Chris clearer than he knows himself. This, too, is cause for celebration. I arrived here this weekend already knowing how so many of you are resourcing our beloved Reverend Chris Long for his calling. I've heard stories about y'all, I have. I've heard stories about the health of this congregation, about the beauty of Scotts Bluff, about your work on passing the 8th principle, on your engagement with the revisions of Article 2. I have heard about your love for one another, quite a bit about good food. We had some yesterday, yes we did. I've heard about multiculturalism and sustainability. I have heard that you have offered this religious leader, transplanted into new community once again, an abundance of rich, good soil. The Reverend Yvonne Sion, our first ordained Black woman Unitarian Universalist minister, who I have to tell you, no longer considers herself a UU. Okay, we tell the truth in the pulpit. She called us back in our reading this afternoon to the sacred that we discover in each moment of homecoming. And with love and transparency, I have to say out loud that the majority of Black UU clergy, most of whom are in this room, we cannot assume. That's worth celebrating. Let's celebrate. But love's the majority of us. We cannot assume that a new call will be a moment of homecoming or a lessening of loneliness in the work. Too often, our historic UU struggles around issues of race and all the projections and mess that go with them work to undermine the health and the possibility of our shared ministries. Except I got here hearing time and again of your sense of mission in the community, of the remarkable relationship that is already burgeoning between your ministers. And at the heart of all of it, there is a wisdom that I believe will nurture this fertile ground for years to come. Reverend Sion once wrote, "I pledge to hold in my heart the memory of African ancestors whose toil, sacrifice, and creative genius allow us, against all odds, to love and be whole." May the promises we make on this day center us in the love that lives at the heart of our beloved tradition, and may they call us back to wholeness. Reverend Chris, this legacy lives at the heart of your ministry. It always has. I've known you almost 20 years. I have loved you fiercely for almost 20 years. That will never change. And I've seen you showing up tirelessly to celebrate the best in every person you encounter. Who's been seen, I don't mean that in a visual sense, by the Reverend Chris Long? Look around. Okay? You celebrate the best in every person you encounter, and then you reflect that goodness back into the justice-seeking power of community. May that calling, that relationship, that good soil continue to grow and thrive here in Baton Rouge. And may your ministry and all those with whom you are privileged to minister be forever blessed, my beloved. Amen. Ashe. Blessed be.